Dear Venerable Sisters and Dhamma friends, today too we are going to start the Dhamma talk. May everyone settle down and give the consent with 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Imecha bhikkhave chattaro ahara king nidana king samudaya king jatika king pabhavati ti. Dear Venerable Sisters, Dhamma friends, according to the particular Sutta known as Maha Thanhasankaya Sutta, the Buddha, out of the question arising from the pernicious view of the Sati Bhikkhu, boiled down the situation to relationship with these views to your craving or your desire, and for that he used very direct reasoning or deductive thinking, and with that bring the congregation of monks, all these 5 aggregates or misunderstanding of the 5 aggregates, or particularly on the consciousness based upon its own due condition or proximate cause. So therefore, if someone is patient enough to observe the proximate cause, they will not entertain doubts, they will not fabricate views, they will not make storytelling. Instead, more and more practice, they will rectify their doubts and they will be straight with their direct understanding. So therefore one has to understand the nutriments for this kind of, either for aggregates or particularly to the consciousness, and make the situation handleable, digestible. The Buddha says, even though there are so much of relevant connections and misunderstanding, everything arising out of the 4 kinds of nutriments. So therefore the multifaceted pernicious view or misunderstanding, fabrications, is because the lack of understanding on these 4 nutriments, namely this gross chewable nutriment, gross or subtle. That's the first. The second one is the different kinds of contacts, and the third one is your volitional activities or your determinations or your will. The fourth one is the consciousness itself. So if someone is to understand them, that is to say from the beginning through the middle to the end, they will not fabricate, they will not entertain doubts. Instead, they will rectify their doubts. They will really understand the cause and effect relationship. It is beyond each and everyone. So they are happening due to their due causes, and with respect to their due causes, due effects happen, whether you accept them and entertain doubts or frustration or tension or not, they are happening according to the law of the nature. So more and more you observe rather than believing what others says, rather than negligent towards that, rather than unmindful towards that, more and more you practice, you can see there are the certain laws or principles. More and more you understand, less and less you feel responsible or feel guilty. You can instead see the relationship, what is happening behind the screen, So understanding of these 4 nutriments is therefore very, very important as one of the link revealing how the cause and the effect or reciprocal interdependentship happens. Instead of taking time and understanding the 4 nutriments, which you can verify under your very nose, if you are going to fabricate and if you are going to make hypotheses, if you are going to make inferences, they will not last, and ultimately you will get more and more get entangled, and therefore it's a radical kind of a invitation or challenge for a rational person. And having introduced these 4 nutriments, then to make it more lucrative, make it more pragmatic, the Buddha says these 4 nutriments itself has its own source, its own origin. It's born from and what it is produced for. So therefore, when and where you are learning the kind of food you are taking as the solid, liquid, or air, that is to say Kabalinkara Ahara, or whatever the kind of contact you get from morning to evening, and what is the kind of volitional activities happening in your mind, and what kind of a consciousness rising and passing away, they have their own due sources. Nidana, that is the source, and Samudaya, that means from where it's arising, the origin, and it's born and produced for what. So, taking one step back towards the cause for these 4 nutriments, the Buddha gave one single factor, the desire, and according to this sutta is known as Thanhasankaya Sutta, and Thanha is the root cause for this, all the 4 kinds of nutriments. And when and where you understand, not by just mere believing, not by argumenting, but your direct touch or direct experience is bound to reduce the tanha or the desire. So therefore learning desire or be aware of the desire, be diligent on the desire, be mindful on the desire, is one key factor. You can get rid of that. You can dwindle off, you can wean off tanha, so therefore bring back the all the situation to one single factor like tanha. So therefore one has to understand, for this sansaric suffering, for this perpetuation of suffering, the most obvious or nearby close aspect, if someone is asking a single factor, this is being called as tanha. That is in the very first discourse of the Buddha, the Dhammajiva Sutta. This suffering and the cause of suffering is given tanha, and that very tanha, whenever you are going to practice or when you are going to apply yourself, you have to understand in detail that where you need theoretical understanding, and then you have to deduce and see whether this detailed understanding is helpful for you to put it to practice. Is this detailed understanding is practical, so that you can reduce tanha not by overnight, by gradual process. So with that respect, the tanha has 3 facets. One day we postponed one question also, asking what is the nature of vibhava tanha. That vibhava tanha is one of the 3 facets of the tanha. In Pali language it is called kama tanha, bhava tanha and vibhava tanha. So all the 3 terms are not much used in our day-to-day vocabulary. So therefore we have to take the technical meaning or contextual meaning, then only we can understand whether it is relevant to our practice, and by understanding and practicing how one can wean off, how can make it lesser and lesser, or make it more and more under control. So therefore, in this process, first and foremost type, the most obvious type is Kama Tanha, and that is been translated into English as sensuous pleasure or sensuous gratification. That means our desire to see different shapes and colors as far as the eye as a faculty. So throughout the life, each and every sentient being try their best to see different shapes and different colors or visual objects in single sense. Or otherwise, should satisfy your ear with different kinds of sounds, music, and we have no end. We can see day by day the musicians are making new products, new albums. They become more popular and people are amusing, chasing behind, for specifically the music lovers. So therefore it is the multivarious in facets. The other one is the different sense or orders, good or bad. We are very skillful in making in this consumer society, and day by day we try to go different sense, and the food, the taste, and people know about the history. They know even the kings and the Maharajas, they used to eat purified food in the dinner, because at that time there was a food-wise they had very limited amount of facilities. Now even a middle class person eating like, if they can manage like Maharaja, any food you can eat by going to the close by town. So food industry, food science is ever increasing. And the other one is the luxury. Simple example is the car. Day by day, they are producing new models. That means more and more comfort, more and more touch, or more and more advance to get the traveling and sitting and our furnitures. Everything is ever increasing, and more these visual and the sounds and smell and taste and tactile sensation increases. Your daydreaming, your pet ideas and bewilderment, fantasizing increasing. So we can see not a single channel knows its limit. Very rarely we use the term enough. It is always not enough. So when it is increasing, that we call Kama Tanha, or in sometimes it says Kama Guna. It is multifacets. Different people have different shades and different colors for their likings and disliking. So you can understand where the world is chasing behind with this invention of the technology and the scientific thinking. The whole world is completely in one way, going for sensuous pleasure. So when it is going, before the invention of the science, they thought when and where the scientific technological improvements, our happiness will be increasing, because that is how they are using. But instead what is happening is our frustration and mental illnesses increasing at a rate. Something like in UK, 25% of the population. And in USA, at least 10% of the school-going age people utterly with the tension. no way, whatever the facilities they have, the number of beds in the asylum increases. They become mad. And it's a hell of a social cost for the governments. So therefore, some started to think about, even though science is increasing, even though the technology is increasing, even though the infrastructure is increasing, even though this communication increasing, how this suffering, and suffering which sometimes very open, sometimes untold suffering, increasing. So therefore, a minority of people, even time the Buddha, even before, even now, they take this gross example and see, even if you are successful in science, technology, and these amenities, is that, what does it mean by well-being of a person? And therefore, some have that radical reflection. You must have to have the moral shame and the moral fear, because science never recognized this as a part and parcel of their development, and rather the opposite. If you wish to be more and more scientific, more and more technological, you have to forget about the healthy shame and the healthy fear, and the moral shame and the moral fear, and ultimately we become robot-like, and facilities are increasing, but this tension. So therefore, some think in a balanced way. Recently, it happened me to read an article. One person is talking about a conscious army. This is understanding this paradoxical situation. Some people try to restrain themselves and see this gross example, and they restrain themselves and try to moderate, and they repeat the term enough. And that conscious army is not only the mindful circles. That's almost similar to the mindfulness, but it is not limited to the Buddhism, not limited to the religious circles, and they understand the global warming, and this pollution, environmental, or your mind, the society at large, no answer. Instead, they think and they come out with themselves the restrainment. The Buddha very clearly explained, if you have any kind of well-being, individual well-being or compassion to yourself, restrainment is the only answer, direct answer. That is sila sikha, moral restrainment, and then the concentration restrainment, and the wisdom. And even if you have enough consideration, enough sensitivity to the moral restrainment, that means the ethical restrainment, that itself is enough for all these world wars and exploitation and discrimination of the wealth, the sick way can be reduced. But the conscious army, they never try to do it in the global level. They do by their own, they as an individual, they do. The most important thing is, whether they know or not, they are in a network. They are completely with the very peaceful ideas. They never violate the social norms, not polluting the environment, and in return, they get lack of mental pollution, and they are confessing, they are professing. If you yourself can impose this restrainment, even though society at large is going for the sensuous pleasure, as a only single way, you can entertain here and now, under your very nose, in this very life, kind of a peace. So that is the part which is related to the kama tanha, that's the sensuous pleasure. So imagine what is the proportion out of the total human population, think in that line and go forward, renunciate the sensuous pleasure temporarily or permanently, and try to live in this moderation of this desire to see shapes and the colors, moderation towards this desire for music and sounds, moderation towards this smell and the odor, and the moderation towards the foods and tastes, and moderation towards these other furnitures and cars and all the kind of contact, and moderation regarding this fantasizing, daydreaming or pet ideas. The alternative is to renunciate this sensuous pleasure and go into kind of a so-called solitude. Or we can say viveka is the term the Buddha is using, and that viveka means kaya viveka, at least get a distance from this kind of mad world. Get a distance and go away and live a life in a moderation, frugal life. And for that, the Buddha says, even though you manage to renounce temporarily or permanently, whatever the sense pleasure you had, chase behind you and tormenting you, torturing you as a perception of sense pleasure. The person may be away from the society at large. People, those who are chasing behind the sense pleasure. He may go to a solitude place. He may take a peace of mind. But by just mere renunciating of this sense pleasure, his mind never become solitude, never become contented, never become peace because of your memory. The whole sense pleasure you had appear like a perception. That's called kama sanya. So only the person renounce, only the person think an alternative, faced with this problem whenever you go and sit and start this obsessional kind of defilements, and it appear like sometimes distractions in sounds, or distractions in your pain of your body, or distractions in your daydreaming, fantasizing, thinking, depressions, and all the kind of things are happening. But no one understands this is the first result of your renunciation. Everyone considers this as an unexpected devil. So you have to learn a lot. Only the renounced people get this one. And therefore, you must understand, it is not your problem. You have to ask your teacher, or you have to ask your master. Now, due to your professing, I renounced. Whenever I renounced, I get more and more tormentation, more and more distractions. That is called obsessional kind of defilements. And when I back at home, I amuse myself with different shapes and different colors. And other time with music, other time with the smell, other time with the different tastes, sometimes with all the other facilities, and thinking maybe drugs or whatever may be. But when you renounce, nothing of that kind, but the mind become highly agitated and distracted. And therefore, whenever you are to consult a person like Buddha, he says, now you have renounced the sense pleasure or sense indulgence, and now you have its mental form. That's called perception. And in order to do away with that, only you have to take refuge of a primary object or material aspect. And as a primary object, try to keep the mind as much as possible with primary object. That is to take refuge of a rupa karmasthana in Pali. And when he become a meditator, he is trying to keep either your body as your primary object or otherwise the intrinsic action of your living body, the breath as your primary object. You try to keep and to try to take a refuge of the materiality, one material object which is and be verifiable, and you can have it free of charge. It won't give any kind of likings and disliking. It's a neutral object, and if you can keep that mind occupied, not only you are free from sense pleasure or sense indulgence, now you can keep the mind free from sensuous perception also. So when and where you go to the materialistic object like in-breath and out-breath, rising and falling, left leg or right leg, or your posture, it is a pivot and it's a benchmark, it's a reference point. More and more you in that benchmark, you are less and less with the sense pleasure and the perception. But that the materiality itself is not the nibbana, it is not the liberation, it is you take it as a pivotal point in order to do away with the materialistic world, sense pleasure. And imagine if someone is successful to keep the mind, keep the stream of consciousness with this particular object, and due to the repetitive application of that object, due to the lack of nirvana or lack of obsessional kind of defilements, he is going to develop gladness, he is going to develop pleasure, he is going to develop continuity of the mindfulness and the clear comprehension, he is going to develop the serenity, he is going to develop the peace of mind. There is another attachment for that earn spiritual gladness and this pleasure, rapture, mindfulness and the concentration. And if he is not well instructed, just like your early desire for this sense pleasure, this materialistic pleasure that's called jhanic pleasure can overwhelm you. And that also can do not like exactly like the sense pleasure addiction. This also can cause, that is called bhavatanha. And when that is happen, it is partly due to your success and partly due to your lack of understanding that this self, which replaces the sensuous pleasure, itself has its own weakness. So therefore, what about having this jhanic pleasure, but without a desire, without an attachment, without a clinging, or without claiming me, mine and itself? It may be more difficult than detachment from the sense pleasure. Unless otherwise, go prepared. Unless otherwise you immunize yourself, unless otherwise you know the danger. So therefore, even if you are successful and come to the success in your materialistic or jhanic experiences, to understand. So when that is happening, you can instead develop immaterial jhanic experiences. So to say, you take the breath, now breath ceases to exist, and there's a kind of a space. And knowing the breath is another addiction, maybe another source of gladness and rapture, you may see or you may consider lack of the breath or the space or the freedom may be better than the breath or jhanic experience, rupa jhana. With respect to the rupa jhana, arupa jhana may be much pleasurable, and therefore you develop kind of a hatred to the rupa jhana and desire for the arupa jhana. That is the book explanation to say vibhavatanha. More you have bhavatanha in order to get rid of the sense pleasure, there is a trap. You may develop attraction to the rupa jhana. So you can have an alternative. You can go to the arupa jhana, that means space, And that itself has some kind of a magnetizing power. And that also you have to understand. So therefore, instead of Rupa Jhana, for Bhavatanha, you can go to the Vibhavatanha, still you are in a trap. But the Arupa Jhana is much, much subtler. It is you get without much of a cost. It is not like earning the shapes and the colors. It is not like earning music. It's not like earning sense, the order and the good and bad, the smells, or the food, or the luxury, or kind of thing. It's immaterial pleasure. And when you go there, there's a kind of a hatred to the materiality. For example, when you are in the very serene, calm and quiet state, if all of a sudden someone cough, or if someone bang the door, you will break open from that kind of magnetizing, and you hate that sound. You hate that coughing. You hate that all the kind of thing. But when you back at home, you yourself cough, no problem. You yourself bang the door, no problem. But now you are understood as far as this materiality is there. You can have jhanic pleasure, but instead you are going to the no material kind of pleasure, no kind of jhanic experience, and there the hatred to the materiality, and nothing to talk about the hatred to the sensuous pleasure. And when you go to that kind of a sphere, you see the people indulging sensuous pleasure is like beastly. They are uncivilized. They are very, very lowly. And I am in such a person. So upon that immaterialistic kind of pleasure, you develop a very core kind of a egocentric idea, a kind of very subtle conceit, and very subtle attachment and magnetizing power. So all the three, the very first kama tanha, we can say it is worldly. It is materialistic. But the jhanic experience of the Rupa Jhana and the Arupa Jhana, generally they are spiritual and subtler, but all of them have the same desire and the same attachment. So whenever the Buddha mentioned, your four nutriments are based on attachment or desire or tanha. It is not merely the sensuous pleasure. It is comprising of all the three kinds of tanha, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. So in the Potthapada Sutta, the discussion with the Potthapada and his disciple with the Buddha, he says, whenever you are with the gross kind of food, you are having this sensuous pleasure, and you have a very gross self, olarika, and when and where you are in the olarika, the gross self, you never understand, you are not in a position to understand how is the jhanic pleasure is. How is the materialistic jhanic pleasure is, because you are now attached to this. You don't know within that humanness, as a human being, you can get rid of this and you can go to the immaterial pleasure. It is free of charge. And in the materialist pleasure, so much of cutthroatism, one-upmanship, fighting, and whoever defeated will develop envious and jealous. But when you go to the immaterial pleasure, it's a walkover, no rivalry. You can have it, so it's much, much spiritual. But no one is going even, because when and where someone is in the materialistic pleasure, they are incessantly chasing behind, telling never enough. So therefore, as far as you are in this gross self, you are deprived of this jhanic pleasure and the jhanic pleasure with respect to the materiality and immaterial jhanic pleasure. Imagine when someone is go to the jhanic pleasure with respect to the materiality, anapanasati, or rising and falling. Of course, rising and falling is not helping that. It is not a samatha object. Whatever the samatha object, then he or she attaching to this materialistic jhanic pleasure, they consider the sensuous being as lowly. And they can't understand. Because they assume so much with their newly earned jhanic pleasure, and they don't consider immaterial kind of jhanic pleasure also. They attach into that kind of thing, they become blind to the sense pleasure as well as the immaterial jhanic pleasure. If someone go to the immaterial jhanic pleasure, they are completely solitude and deviated from the other beings, those who are entertaining the sensuous pleasure, as well as or maybe jhanic pleasure with respect to the materiality, they hate them. So therefore, whenever you go to the immaterialistic kind of jhanic experience, you hate sense pleasure, you hate jhanic pleasure, because you are conceited. So therefore, within a person, 3 possibilities are there, but some people born like human sensuous being and die like sensuous being. They never cross into and check into, test and check and earn the jhanic pleasure. So they know only very little fraction of humanity, and they are the bloody fools running for decisions. They are the try to be judges. They are the try to be people deciding about others, and they are the people making so much of fuss. Imagine instead, knowing this sense pleasure is like child's play as a immature, and if you can go to the jhanic pleasure by concentration, and you can experience serenity, solitude, and not much consuming material. It is an immaterial kind of pleasure. And they understand how the human beings, just like infants who playing kindergarten children, and once go there, he or she can have a bird's eye view about the affairs, and they are in a better position to arrive at a decision, but they are more cautious not to take decision, because more involvement for the decision is destructive for their jhanic bliss. When they go to the immaterial pleasure sphere, still they never mingle with this kind of thing, and that indicate they are much deviated from that life. So they are easily hate them, and they try to be immaterial pleasure, immaterial sphere. And within a person, if you only know the sense pleasure, you have no chance to understand your possibility. So if you are gone into the passing the sensuous pleasure and passing the materialistic jhana and go to the immaterial jhana, at least you know 3 possibilities, but still you are entrapped. So therefore, understanding all 3 and see how much this desire, how much this craving trap you in different layers. The very first one we call transgressional kind of defilements. The second one we call the obsessional kind of defilements. And the third one we call the hidden type, that is tendencies. Your directed dispositions or subtle tendencies, unless otherwise you go there, even if you go there, unless otherwise you listen to the Dhamma, still you consider you are better, you are superior than sensuous being, superior than the materialistic jhanic experience, but fail to understand, still you trap. So therefore the Buddha says at least you must have theoretical understanding. From the viewpoint of the enlightened beings, like Buddha, and they teach you, but people will be happy to get the PhDs and other kind of thing in the worldly matters, physics, chemistry, all the kind of thing. That is the bloody foolish thing. I also did 11 years in my life, and we never think to go and practice in-breath and out-breath. So they will say, by looking at what are you going to get? It is you are denying It is your escapism. So therefore, if you must be really, really taking a challenge, you must live with the sensuous being and give a fight and learn all the worldly knowledges. And it is not, your life is not enough, even for the worldly knowledge. But leaving that, telling enough at a level and go to the jhanic experiences, then you can understand. And even there is another sphere, layer, that is called Vibhavatanna, that is immaterial sphere. And if you go there, and still you are to understand, I am not escaped, I am not liberated, now kind of a trap is there. There you can understand how much this desire, how much this craving trapped us in threefold manner. So more and more you go there, you understand so far in your being, if you are believing the rebirth and dying and again reborn, how much you proliferate sense pleasure for your whole life, how much you prescribe it for your children, how much you are happy to have more and more sense pleasure, you as a nation, as a sect, as a society, as a family. And more you go to immaterialistic kind of thing and still see, even you try to get rid of this desire, it is chasing behind you and torturing you, tormenting you. So when and where you see the desire from that point of view, you will understand how much thing you would have accomplished in order to torture you, in order to burn you. And ultimately when the torturing and burning happens, you think you attribute it to an omnipotent, omnipresent God, or to your neighbor, or to your government, or to the climate, or to your food, or whatever the other thing. This is what you call the pernicious views, fictitious views. You never understand, I am the bloody fool, facilitated so much of sense pleasure, so much of maybe materialistic jhanic pleasure, or maybe immaterial jhanic pleasure. So someone to have that kind of openness or radical reflection, the Buddha makes sure it never happened by an accident, unless otherwise you listen to the Buddha, unless otherwise you listen to a true person, unless otherwise you listen to a noble person. And even noble person is successful in teaching you how difficult for you to understand it, how difficult it is to go from the theoretical knowledge to the deductive knowledge. Because majority of the people, 99.9999, still chasing behind and still not happy with the sense pleasure. All the governments, all the economists, all the social people, social well-being talking about, they talk in terms of this sense pleasure. And they don't know, at the end of the sense pleasure, you will end up with HIV virus, or cancer, or any kind of the terminal diseases. They should have a world full of sense pleasure, but no with that kind of bad consequences. That is the task of the science, that is the task of the medical science, that is the task of the lawyers, that is the task of the doctors and the government. We are to entertain the sense pleasure, and that is what we ever listen from the media. That is what we ever listen from the advertisement. And they are governing. I would say, even if you become a forest monk, you can't escape. Media is so subtle. It is coming and hitting you, no way out. So, people, those who have not thought about renunciation, they are fully engaged in household life, they have on top of that the guilt and lack of moral restrainment. Maybe lack of faith, it's a tormenting. They are making a self-made hell on this very earth. So therefore the Buddha says, if you have any kind of well-being, a sense of well-being, try to have this faith about something on this kind of teaching, and restrain yourself, learn the term enough, and then try to restrain at least your verbal and physical activities. And then, if possible, go and practice and see how much of lack of faith, how much of lack of morality contributing to the guilt and the remorse. And ultimately, if that is the thing going to happen, your last episode in your life, what was the cutting edge of the end of your life? That is what the desire is for the next life, if you are believing the birth, rebirth and kind of thing. And if you have any kind of a well-being, what about restraining a little bit and have this faith on this kind of teaching and the deductive thinking and practicing, and the whole world reject yourself as a person escaping. You are deviating from your household responsibilities, and that is how this desire is chasing behind you. So the Buddha says, even if you are in the full of desire, but your understanding of theoretical understanding of this desire is a completely new thing, unhindered by your responsibilities. Listen and give a thought. See what is happening. Whole humanity up to now, at the deathbed, desperate. Uno loko atito kamadaso. They are utter slaves to this sense pleasure. While they at the deathbed, they are unsatisfactory and something lacune. Not a single person go to the death with happiness, because throughout their life that was the nature. So why don't you give a second thought and understand? Still you may be full of craving, you may be full of desire. This is theoretical understanding. And when and where you become solitude, let go away from this sense pleasure and try to understand where is the more tension you are going to have, where is the more frustration you are going to have, where is the more guilt you are going to have, remorse going to go have in this household life with full of responsibilities, or this renounced life. I would say, even if you renounce with the wrong perception or wrong view, you will arrive wrong decision. Because today, if you go to a country like Sri Lanka, you can see how many recluse, monastics, they are utter suffering. Nothing they gain by becoming a monk and becoming a nun. They are more suffering sometimes than lay people. Because I have been in this monk's life from 89 onward, and I am associating more monks than you. And I know, before the ordination, I had 10 years learning and questioning about this desire is so dramatic. It is so enlivening. It is so vigilant. And that gave me so much of experience. Even as a monk, I know how to find a reason to be glad under any circumstances. So therefore I love myself. Even though my brothers and religious sisters, they suffer. Therefore I am telling, even you renounce, that peace of mind is not assured. Unless otherwise you have the correct view. Unless otherwise you have the correct reasoning. So therefore, as a lay person even, you can live the lay life, you can still facilitate the same way to the desire and be aware of it. So when you are aware of it, you can see the desire become the proximate factor for this nutriment. Desire itself has its own proximate factor. So therefore, as a monastic or as a lay person, if you do know the proximate factor for the desire, then this renunciation is just physical one. It won't give any organic differences. It won't give any change in your thinking pattern. So therefore the Buddha is asking, after having little bit of theoretical understanding on this desire, do you know what is the source of what is the source for this, the desire itself? Do you know what is the origin of the desire? How it born and produced desire? Then the Buddha says, I would like to state and tell you, the feelings are the proximate factor for the desire. And according to the Sigmund Freud, it says pleasure principle. As far as you are behind the pleasure principle, the end result, invariable end result is the desire. So therefore, renunciation, physical renunciation, or just mere theoretical understanding won't help reduce desire unless otherwise you know from where does it comes. What is the source? What is the origin? How and when this desire is produced, then the Vedana, the feeling you have to understand. So, just the same explanation what we have taken for the sense pleasure, we are always for the justifiable or unjustifiable manner, we are chasing behind pleasure. In a good way or bad way, openly or in a hidden way, we are chasing behind the pleasure. But no one knows or no one ready to accept at the end of each and every pleasurable feeling, you get unpleasure, pain. End of the pleasurable feeling is a pain. So, face value of the pleasurable feeling, and while it is pervading, of course it appears pleasurable, but end of the pleasure is a pain, but you fail to look at, fail to see, fail to digest it, because your mind is with the desire or undermining tendency of the liking for the desire. So even the desire going to give the end result pain, you are not ready to accept. Still you are chasing behind the pain itself. So therefore, you have to understand pain itself, the pleasure we can take. Pleasure itself as its arising mode, it's a prevalent and a transitional mode, and then the cessation part. Any person who is geared for this pleasure principle, they are never happy to see the end of the pleasure principle, end of the pleasure as a feeling, which is utter bankruptcy. It's utter failure. It is utter negation. Appear like a nihilistic. So therefore, whenever someone is to ask you to analyze this pleasure principle and see what's the end part of the pleasure principle, even that suggestion appear like nihilistic. So therefore the Buddha says the pain or pleasure, both they have this kind of a camouflage. At the beginning pain is painful, but the end pleasurable. At the beginning of the pleasure, pleasurable, at the end it is painful. So therefore, just don't take the face value, just wait and be patient to see end of the pain and end of the pleasure. If the world is full of pleasure, and even if it is going to end up with the pain, you are in the winning side. And there the Buddha is giving a fact. World is full of pleasure. World is full of pain. So therefore, at the end of the pain, if it is a pleasure, what about observing and embracing of the end of the pain? That is a Nibbana. So therefore, you have to have a new look or new approach or new preparedness to see this painful feeling, because whenever it is going, disappearing, it is none of Buddha's business or your business or the omnipotent, omnipresent God business. That's the law of the nature. End of the pain is pleasure. But if you are hating it, you are hating Nibbana. You are hating the disappearing part of the pain, and that is how all the anesthesia, all the alcohol, all the committing suicide, all kind of recipes, not to look at, not to wait to see the end of the painful feeling. So therefore, whenever Buddha is inviting you to see the pain, don't throw away as a package, just see the end. Be patient, and definitely you are going to end up with the pleasure. They accuse the Buddha as nihilistic, and person who do not know the joy of the life. And that is why he is recommending you to be with the pain. And they don't know the message really. Message is, don't get distracted whenever the pain is appearing, whenever pain is torturing you. Then if you can maintain, one day you will see the disappearance part of the pain is a pleasure. And equally, your natural tendency is to expect more and more pleasure, not only for you, even for your children, even for your dear and near one. And if you wish Happy New Year, Happy Christmas, Happy pleasure, at the end of it, if it is a pain, what you are wishing to your dear and near one? At the end of it, definitely it's a curse. So therefore, Buddha, no nonsense. He never say Happy New Year, Happy Christmas, Happy... The nonsense there. Of course, when person like me come to Australia, every people like I am like a barbaric because we are not telling good morning. And people, you go to the shop, they say, hello, how are you, good morning, because for their business. They are good salesmen. And everywhere, and we can go back. In Sri Lanka, they say, Sri Lankan people are not greeting like that, specifically monks, of course, the forest monks. No good morning, no good evening, no good Happy New Year, no Christmas. So appear like we are brooding suffering, brooding pain. But from this understanding regarding the feeling, the Buddha says, don't just take the pain and the pleasure from their face value, just see the end of the pain and the end of the pleasure. Miraculous thing happen. Before pain, instant arise another pleasure, there is a gap. Gap area, you can't say either pain or pleasure. And whenever you go and stuck, if you are patient enough to see the end of the pain, and you will see it's a pleasurable, and again, we'll say again a pain arises, or again another pleasure arises. And if you are managed to see the end of the pain, you will see after dwindling off, it's going to a grey area. It is uncertain. It's a fearful. It's something new. But so far you have not seen this grey area, and you can't put a label to that grey area as a pain or pleasure. So you have to put the two terms together, no pain, no pleasure. And whenever you go to meditation, and whenever you go to understanding of the pain and the pleasure, you no sooner you will go and stuck the area, and where you can't label it as pain or pleasure. And if you are not instructed, if you don't go prepared, definitely you will put this as boredom, monotonous, fearful, uncertain, and cornered, simply unpleasant. So therefore you try your best not to look at it, but instead jump into the appearing pain or pleasure next. So therefore each time you can see there's a rush. Whenever the disappearance of the pain and the pleasure happen, there's a rush to jump into the next episode. And you can understand throughout the samsara, you have jumped over this area. But imagine if this is the middle path, if this is the path to liberation, As far as you become a pleasure principle, or as far as you try to be with the Attakilamatana yoga, or Kamasukallikaana yoga, or sensuous pleasure or self-hatred, you will never see no pain, no pleasure area. Even if you see, appear like boring, appear like monotonous, appear like sleepy, appear like the uncertain or doubtful. So therefore, the Buddha, he says, when you are going to meditate, when and where the high pleasurable feelings and the painful feeling become little tamed, docile, calm down, mind try to associate, familiarize more than ever on this no pain, no pleasure area. There you can see this border, more and more boring, more and more monotonous, and more you feel cornered, more and more you feel uncertain, and more you feel fearful, insecure. And therefore, you either change the object or change the teacher or change the meditation center and go to another place thinking that meditation is not clear enough. It is puddled, it is muddled, I don't know what is happening. So instead you wanted to have a label or known thing because you think liberation is in the known area. But the Buddha says, you may understand the known area may or may not be with the liberation, unknown area may be with liberation. If it is so, if you have this habitual roaming in only the known area, you will never go to the side of the Nibbana or the middle path or the liberation because of your phobia, because of your allergic reaction. So when are you going to give a radical reflection and try to be with unknown area? It is like running a risk. That is why the Buddha says, don't go in missionary work and tell others to meditate, because you can't ask someone to go and dwell in this unknown area, dwell in this boring area, dwell in this monotonous area, because it appears like a wrong profession, professing, wrong instruction. Heavily you will get misunderstood. You can suggest it, but if you are a religiously moved and you are a radical kind of a person, then one day you will understand why the Buddha is asking to contemplate on the feeling as feeling. That is not pleasure principle. That is not to hate the pain. That is not to have the underlying tendency of desire for the pleasure, but let them play, note them as them, pain and pleasure and pressure, and try to see the transitional part from the pain to pleasure and the pleasure to pain. That is why you are being asked to see the end of the in-breath, end of the out-breath, end of the rising mode, end of the falling mode, because it is physical, it is tangible, it is one can be directed, it is not immaterial, it's materiality. Once you are trained, your mindfulness is very sharp, mind is very sensitive, then the same very sharp mindfulness, whenever the pain and pleasure are going to play you have to understand they never permanent, they are always changing reciprocally each other, and let them play. And when and where possible, with your thin slicing of time, try to see the disappearing part of the pain, disappearing part of the pleasure, and don't go with premeditated ideas, don't go with assumptions, don't go with expectation, just see what is happening, and between pain and the pleasure, always the middle path is there. And when and where go to the middle path, boring and monotonous means lack of desire, lack of craving. So the craving and the lack of craving is just a thought moment distance. Pain to no pain, no pain to pleasure, in between, whenever the monotony happen, boredom happen, if you are really understand the danger of the desire, if you really understand the danger of craving, just consider this as an alternative. Now you have gone to the other extreme, that is monotony and boredom, uncertainty, fearfulness. Just wait and see how you can see when you go to the pleasure, desire. That is what your mother taught you. That's what your teacher taught you. Your father taught you. Your dear and dear aunt taught you. But the Buddha says, when we are that pleasure is disappearing, you feel fear, uncertain, boring, and just try to be there. It may be a radical answer or way out for this desire. Don't get allergic. Don't get phobia. And that is what you call the sensuous being or putujjana. But going into that and familiarizing, going to make a big change, not only pain and pleasure, your personality, your likings and dislikings, and your karmic forces, and your habits. But this is not going to, that particular thought moment going to give us such a drastic difference, but it indicates the possibility or potential. So that potential is there, you have to pick it. That is natural selection. But our mind is always, instead of rejecting, selecting, we are rejecting it and call the monastic life is very boring. Forest living is very boring. Sitting under the tree is boring. Going to a solitude place is boring. And then we are asking why you are meditating. I am trying to meditate to get rid of desire. But can I have the desire without boredom? Well, Buddha says, another term for desire is raga, boredom is viraga, and monotony is a viraga, uncertainty is a sign of viraga. So when you are so quickly met up with, faced with this boredom and monotony, you are so allergic and quickly you think, never mind the monastic life, never mind the middle path, the known devil is better than unknown. So you come back and chasing behind the desire, again the raga. So understand, whenever you are going to understand this feeling as such, it is giving a door opening, this pain, this pressure, and in between the grey area, it is not depending on the maleness or femaleness. It is not depending on whether you are a meditator or not. It is not dependent upon whether you are learned or not. Only dependent whether you go prepared for or not. If you go prepared, the Venerable Dhammajiva, the Arahant Bhikkhuni, she says very nicely, she says, if you know you go prepared for the no pain, no pleasure, if you know now I am in the no pain, no pleasure, it's utter pleasure. If you do not know, you are in utter desperation. You will commit suicide, no problem. Because everything is boring. Everything is monotonous. Because you don't go prepared. So when that preparedness is going to happen in your life, no one knows. Keep on practicing. Keep on practicing. One day, the change may happen. Instead of getting allergic to this boredom and the monotony and finding ways out for this kind of thing, you'll just embrace it on the experimental basis. The moment you embrace, it's a completely different story. That embracement is not a defeat. It is not escapism. Because you are do it with faith, you do it with your precepts and the moral integrity, and do with mindfulness. And it is accountable. You have the history. And if it is good, next day also you can go in the same way. If it is bad, it's such a small, minute thing, won't going to destroy you. So now you become responsible. Whether you go prepared for viraga, or you can develop allergic nature for the viraga. All the physical and mental diseases due to this misunderstanding, due to this unpreparedness. Moment you go prepared, you are a completely different person. And it is, don't think it is your own will. No. Only your own trial and error. Only your preparedness, and it is somewhat related to the faith. Otherwise, invariably you are entertaining doubts. And it's more for the learned people. So therefore, if you know that my learnedness and my result-oriented nature and my expectation completely going to work negatively, as far as you know it, it is not so poisonous, it is not so grippy. So you knowing that, if you go, that very approach is called innocence. Even if you are a learned person, if you are a rationalizing person and result-oriented person, understand this is due to the addiction and due to the so much of acquaintance it is happening. Don't claim it. Just innocent. Practice. One day you will be open to the feeling, not with the pleasure principle, not with the hate to the pain, just have the equal, or at least on the theoretical basis, and you are seeing the world or phenomena towards you completely in a different way. And more you to go there. So my simple terminology is, you become rejuvenated. You never become old age. You never know salinity can happen, cannot happen. You rejuvenate it. Because each and every moment is crispy. Every moment is against the grain. Every moment the boredom is happening, you are ready to embrace it. It is not nihilistic. It is not escapism. Because of your faith, because of your moral integrity, because of your mindfulness or diligence, and then you can make a hobby or way of living. So therefore, not you are promoting boredom, not you are promoting monotony. What you are doing is, when and where it is happening, you let it happen, and if possible, see this boredom is due to your mindfulness. See this boredom is because of your restrainment. And if it is so, that boredom is healthy. And the moment you recognize it and face it, it itself becomes pleasure. More and more you to practice, you see there's nothing hindering. There's no blockage. No one can stop. You are experimenting and repeating it, and then you feel that is my human right. I have my human rights. It is not to have that the right or this right. I have my human right just to see feelings have three facets. Unlearned mind, unmeditated mind is only meddling with the pain and pleasure. Whenever no pain, no pleasure happen, it rejects it, telling boredom and the monotony. I would have a new, fresh look. Let it happen and I will observe it. When you're observing, you can see this attitude or this preparedness going to make a big difference. When it is happening, hardly you will attribute it to a spirituality. It is a natural selection. It is called a gist. It's called a blink. That blink is impersonal. That's always electric. No one can predict. But only you can do is give the conducive conditions for that. That is open-mindedness. And not premeditated ideas or choiceless awareness. Let it happen, and when you go there, when it happens, you see Dhamma. That is the Dhamma, crispy Dhamma, living Dhamma. And when it is happening, you will understand who the Buddha is. With what kind of a background he is teaching you. It is not to amuse you. It is not to give you just a temporary thing. It is making you organically or chemically or physically completely different person. But that won't make a lasting results. Now you have to live. Now you have to live up to it. You have to make it more and more familiarized, more and more maximized. And my simple evidence is, when you have that kind of attitude, no blockade, no one can stop you towards this attitude. So that rights I call human rights, and don't disturb anyone's human right. Any person can change at any time. It is electric. So therefore, you can openly tell them this is what it happens, but don't force them. You have no right. Because the way it came to me, when that message crossed into me, never through an expected person, never in an expected mood or moment, never happen in expected quantity, always intrinsic. So that is how it becomes very crispy. No one can rob it from you. No one can give it to you. It is no one's authority. So therefore, hardly any religious person can go into that sphere. But religious is something closed. So ism, for the feelings, if you have to have the total, complete opening, you have to understand the limitations of the ism. No harm, you can belong to that sect or this sect. But whenever you go to the feelings, keep it open, and you will lose, I am sorry to say, your maleness and femaleness. You will lose your age. You will lose your all traits. You will lose your all personalities, and ultimately you become an infant or just like a newly born. So next moment, again fresh. Again fresh. So let again the agony come. Let again the uncertainty come. And try to rectify it without the second person, without any tool, without any external thing. So you become omnipotent, omnipresent, and ultimately you feel like a God. Only by understanding feeling. So today I am going to stop at that level. So hope your present experience and the theoretical knowledge, together with these points that I have given, you will practice more and more in an open-minded way and hit the target of this total picture of the feeling and rejuvenate yourself. Thank you very much for listening.